pro-innovation bias at work, where new technology is just understood to be inherently better, and that it's going to be superior, and we overvalue the benefits and overlook the risks and flaws. We have to accept human behaviour the way it is, not the way we would wish it to be. And by the way, for engineer in that statement, you could substitute designer, founder, developer. We all have this flaw. We create an idealised view of the world in which what we do is successful and everybody's using it. Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, I'll try and live up to all that. My name is Rick Monroe. I currently head up the product design team at a company called Slice, occasional consultant to startups and to scaling design teams as well. I want to talk to you about behaviour change because it's central to everything we do as designers or founders or builders or developers. If we put something out into the world, then if it's for people to use, people will decide whether that's a success or a failure, and that will be evident in their behaviour and in how they use and how they adopt what we put out there. Now that means understanding what people are doing today and then being very intentional about what you want them to do with what you're providing them, and that is never a given. So many startups fail not because of a poor value proposition or because of some fundamental flaw with the product, but because achieving even small amounts of behaviour change is incredibly hard. And the good news is that we can learn from mistakes of the past, hopefully other people's mistakes, and apply those lessons to our own work. And I'm hoping we can do that this evening. I'd like to talk to you first about this door. So this is the door of a public building in Belfast. It's the electoral office for Northern Ireland. And I used to walk past this door twice a day for around 6 months. I would pass it on the way into work and pass it on the way out of work. I never saw anybody go into the building or try to get into the building. I didn't try to get in myself, but I walked past this for about 6 months and just used to shrug my shoulders and wonder what was going on there. We'll come back to that. I'll talk first about Walmart. So Walmart are the world's largest retailer, have been for many years. And in 2009, they were embarking on a new strategy for the following year. And they gave it a name. It was called Project Impact. And it was customer focused. It was intended to improve the customer experience. So all very worthy goals, and it was documented. So here's Time magazine, who will feature later in this segment, who reveal Walmart's latest move to crush the competition. And here I've highlighted that one goal of Project Impact is cleaner, less cluttered stores that will improve the shopping experience. Now, the reason they were decluttering the stores was because they had surveyed their customers about whether this was the right thing to do. And it went something like this. Walmart asked, would you like our stores to be less cluttered? Customer says, yes, please, sounds good. And Walmart said, okay, let's do this. We're going to reduce inventory, as they did. They reduced inventory in the shops by around 15%. They cleaned up the aisles, they cleaned up all the displays, and they applied this approach across the vast majority of their stores. So here we are, massive organisation, they're customer focused, customer obsessed, as all these organisations are. What's the alternative really if you're a retailer? And they surveyed their customers, is this the right thing to do? What could go wrong? So what did go wrong was Walmart lost over $1 billion in revenue in the following year that was directly attributable to that decision. Sales declined, They lost the revenue, they put the stuff back in the shops, and the sales went back up. So Walmart weren't stupid. It wasn't a crazy idea that they plucked out of the blue. Their failure came from underestimating how much behavioural work the old design was doing. So you may think that I'm kind of pulling this example out of the distant past, 15, 16 years, and exaggerating for effect for the purposes of this talk. That is not the case. Thankfully, all of this is documented. So here we are in October 2009. Walmart's Project Impact redesign takes toll on sales. A few months later, Walmart's Project Impact craters sales, but the retailer persists. They're determined, if nothing else. And then finally, Walmart declutters aisles per customer's request, then loses $1.85 billion. So you can see there were various estimates, but we can say that they lost between $1 and $2 billion based on this. So here's the world's largest retailer not understanding their customers. They made a huge decision based on assumptions and confirmation bias from the survey that they put out to customers. So what could they have done, or what should they have done? What they could have done was a very basic sanity check on their decisions. So this is a very simple quadrant model from consultant writer David Bland called the Assumptions Map. And what Bland is saying here is that in any initiative, in any project, as you make decisions, some of them are important, some of them are unimportant. And as you make those decisions, you either have evidence for them or you don't have evidence. And what that leaves us with is a top right quadrant, which is full of incredibly risky decisions if you choose to go there. And that quadrant is full of assumptions. And it's exactly where you should start when you begin to test your assumptions and begin to investigate what you should do. And we'll come back to what those experiments might look like later on. But right now we're going to go back a little bit further back in time, maybe 8 or 9 years, to 2001. So this is the cover of Time magazine from December 2001. Time magazine at this point had a circulation in print of over 4 million copies. It's a very prestigious magazine, still is, although not with that circulation. But it has gravitas. If you have content in Time magazine, it means something. So the magazine leads, quite rightly, with the untimely death of George Harrison. It's a very sparse cover. So some of the other things that might have expected to make the cover are up at the very top of the magazine cover. And you'll see up there, it says, the invention that everyone is buzzing about. Buzzing in 2001 applied only in certain places. So there was no social media, for instance. So if there was a buzz about something, particularly in tech, that was happening in maybe 2 places. One would be the tech press, online and offline, magazines, websites, and also discussion boards. So before there was social media, there were discussion boards, and that's where you would go to have kind of timely discussion or real-time discussion around a particular topic. And my experience was, at that time, a couple of very popular design forums were talking about this. Now, all that was known about this invention was that it was centered around personal transport of some kind. It was shrouded in secrecy. It had a couple of code names. It was at one time called Project Ginger. At another time, it was just called It. And there was a lot of speculation around it. There were stories that people like Steven Spielberg and Steve Jobs had seen this thing, and they were astounded by what they had been shown. And without exaggeration again, it got to the point where some people were suggesting that we were going to get hoverboards or personal jetpacks. Such was the anticipation around this thing. So there were 10 pages in Time magazine dedicated to the launch of this thing. And what emerged was this. Does anybody not know what this is? It's called the Segway. And you may have seen it in Modern Family. It's an object of ridicule. Has anybody ridden on a Segway? Where was that?
South Africa.
South Africa. And what was the context?
Sun City did like Segway tours.
Oh, Segway tours. Okay, yes, tourism and we're
Just here in Belfast, get a tour.
a tour.
As a punishment for me.
Okay. I mean, amazing technology. Maybe a bit difficult to learn, but amazing technology. So amazing that Dean Kamen, who was the inventor of the Segway, expected things to change to accommodate his invention. So these are quotes from that Time magazine. With the Segway, Kamen plans to change the world by changing how cities are organised. It will be to the car what the car was to the horse and buggy. So again, no exaggeration, fever pitch for this thing. And that point about city planning, Dean Kamen expected mass market adoption of this. He expected to be selling 100,000 units every week. In its lifespan, it sold maybe 40,000 units in total, and then it found niche markets like tourism and that kind of thing. Now again, I'm not exaggerating for effect. Thankfully, the internet never forgets. What still exists is the original promotional video for the Segway. Now, there is sound in this. I'm hoping it's going to come through here or somewhere else. If the sound doesn't come through, never mind. The pictures will tell you everything you need to know. The quality's pretty low. In 2001, it was cutting edge, but we'll go for it and we'll see where we get.
One of the things that's really exciting about this technology is that, simply put, if you can walk there, this device will take you there. It will just take you there a little more efficiently, a little faster. This device is much closer to something you wear. You get on it, and you lean forward, and you go forward. You lean back, and you go back. It's as intuitive as walking. It's really an extension of your body that just gives you more power, more agility. What Henry Ford did in the last century for rural America is what this device will do in the next century for city dwellers all over this country and all over the planet. We have a solution, and it's a cost-effective, energy-effective solution, and that's a really big deal.
Okay, so I think I might have heard some sniggers or laughs during that. I'm not sure. I didn't try to build that up as being funny, but you know, looking back now, and it's okay to be a smart ass in retrospect, or it's very easy to do that. But looking back, you can see how kind of ridiculous the idea was that this would ever gain the mass market adoption that Kamen thought it would. He'd said there at the end, we have a solution. He appeared to have a solution to walking, which he said right at the start. At the start of the video, he said, if you can walk there, this can take you there. Or you could walk. So there was an inherent flaw in what Kamen was thinking, and it's a bias which is built into every founder and every creator. It's, I have built this thing, and it will get used. Again, we've documented history about this. Ginger, which was one of the code names, has been unveiled. It's a scooter. It's a scooter formerly known as Ginger. Not at all like the Sinclair C5. In the 1980s, Sinclair C5 was the equivalent. Total failure of personal transport. Technological marvel, and it was and is. Too bad it doesn't make any sense. And then finally, Time magazine, absolute turncoats, put Segway at the #1 in their list of tech failures of the last decade. So this was a kind of all too predictable reaction, pro-innovation bias at work, where new technology is just understood to be inherently better, and that it's going to be superior, and we overvalue the benefits and overlook the risks and flaws. Great quote from George Leonard, who was a writer and educator. What he's saying here is that the greater the degree of behaviour change required, the greater the risk of failure, even if it looks like an attractive option. Trying to change behaviour is difficult. And I mentioned founders kind of having this bias towards wanting their innovation or their creation to be adopted. Particularly if you're a founder, you tend to live in the future. You live in this point in the adoption curve where everybody's using your thing, and that's how you see it, and you keep putting more and more features into it because that's what people want. And early stage startups particularly can't think critically about the idea. They're too much in love with it, almost out of necessity, because they have to have that belief that it's going to succeed. But really all technology starts down here. Nobody's using it, and unless you gain traction, it's not going to be adopted. A great quote from Don Norman in The Design of Everyday Things, seminal book on design. We have to accept human behaviour the way it is, not the way we would wish it to be. And by the way, for engineer in that statement, you could substitute designer, founder, developer. We all have this flaw. We create an idealised view of the world in which what we do is successful and everybody's using it. So the Segway failed not because the technology was bad, it was brilliant, not because the design was bad necessarily, but because it ignored behavioural reality. So when we put anything out into the world, it's our mission to, or should be our mission, to establish behavioural reality. And we can do that through experiments. This is something called the landscape of user research methods by Christian Rohrer. And it's got two axes. Here it goes from behavioural, which is what people do, to attitudinal, which is what people say. And as we all know, those are two very different things. And then we've got qualitative data through to quantitative data. And all of these methods, and I've kind of reduced this a bit just for clarity. This is full of stuff if you look up the original. But each of these individual research or experimental methods lives somewhere in this landscape. And what Walmart did was they worked from a very extreme point on this model. So they went with a survey, which is all quantitative, and what people say they will do. And it's just one data source or one data point. And they essentially asked their shoppers, asked their customers to agree that clutter was undesirable. And they did that without understanding actual shopping behaviour, the behavioural reality of where their customers were. So they used a single signal, ended up with bad data. In enterprises particularly, we can be obsessed with analytics. Analytics packages are big business, and there are folks who are paid high salaries to sift through them and find out some source of truth from those analytics. But again, that's just a single point on this landscape. A better way to think about experiments is through something like this. This is a test card from a company called Strategizer. Strategizer was set up by Alex Osterwalder, who created the business model Canvas. He's got a lot of great tools on there that all work together in order to help founders and companies just establish truth about what they're offering the world. So this is really simple, but really hard. Working with startups, this is always an extremely difficult exercise for them to complete. So it starts with a hypothesis. We believe that this is the case. Then it moves on to a test to verify that we will do this thing. And then you apply a metric to the thing and you measure that. And then you add a criteria to say you're right if those numbers reach a certain point. Incredibly difficult, but a really worthwhile exercise in order to de-risk what you're putting into the world. Really quickly, this is the behavioral model from Stanford Behavior Design Lab. It's somewhat academic. What this is saying is that desired behavior, B, is more likely to happen if three other things come together at the same time. That is motivation, ability, and trigger. And we say this all the time on our devices. So your phone pinging you about an appointment. Notifications try to be the trigger. They know you have the ability because you've got the phone in your hand, and they hope that you have the motivation to do the thing whenever that trigger arrives. A better model is the East model. And this came out of the Behavioural Insights team, who were part of the Cabinet Office around 2012, 2014. And this was created to simplify behavioural science for policy adoption. So this is a model that is intended to gain or help gain widespread behavioural adoption in the wider community or wider society. It was updated in 2024 to reflect 10 years of updates to behavioural science. It's very accessible. It's a great tool. Depending on where you work, what you're doing, it's worth taking a look at this and trying to adopt certainly parts of it in your work. I'm coming towards the close now, and I'm going to ask the room, do you know what this is? It's a urinal, of course. In there is the urinal fly. And this, it's also known as a shiitake trigger. And I'm reliably told that shiitake translates from Japanese into means. So it simply means a means to an end. This was first used in Schiphol Airport, and it is one of the more successful behavioural cues that has ever existed. Reports from first use of this said that it reduced what we could politely call spillage by around 80%. And it shows how behavioural cues embedded in an environment can shift behaviour into desirable directions. So Walmart, for instance, although they didn't know it, had removed all of their behavioural cues. So all of that clutter that prompted people or inspired people to kind of try and discover something new or forage for deals, they removed them, and that changed the behaviour of their customers in a negative way for their business. Back to our door. So like I say, I walked past this for around 6 months, back and forward. My work location moved, and I didn't see this door again for a couple of years. And I walked past it, and I went to do my usual glance over to, roll my eyes at what was on the door, but something very significant had changed. It turns out that all along there was a buzzer. And people didn't know there was a buzzer, and so they tried the door, and it looked like they were trying to break into the building. But this was a very simple behavioural cue. They could have included from day one, but they didn't. They just screamed at people what they couldn't do. But it's another example, very simple example of how behavioural cues can point people towards the right behaviour. So I'm going to finish up, and I'm thinking about what I can leave you with based on all of that. So here are 3 takeaways I would commend to you. Firstly, understand behaviour before you try to change it. So it's not about what you want to make and what you want to put out into the world. It's about what works for people. So something that you think might look scrappy and inefficient might still be effective. So respect what already works, try and leverage it and learn from it. Don't design against existing behaviours, design with them. So if you can leverage what people are already doing and build on that, you're more likely to be successful in what you want them to do. If your product or design requires people to unlearn habits before they get value from what you provide, then the adoption will probably stall and fail. Finally, if the environment can't change, then your design must. So cities did not change for Segway. Deep-seated shopping behaviours did not change for Walmart. So if you're designing within a larger system, then that system is very likely to be the thing that's placing constraints on what you have to design within. It very rarely works the other way. I will leave you with this quote from Margaret Mead, anthropologist. People don't always do what they say, but they always do what they do. Never truer words spoken. So don't leave the success of your work to assumptions about what people will do with your work. The most dangerous assumption in design is that people will just adapt, because most of the time they won't. Thank you very much.